The transport shuttle cut through the silent dark of space as the stars stretched outside. The thick glass panels of the window where Captain Rayton sat still in his seat, his uniform freshly pressed, his boots tightly fastened, his eyes scanning the endless distance ahead of him. Though his body sat steady, there was a quiet storm behind his calm face, a mixture of nerves, thoughts, and heavy questions floating in his mind like debris left behind after battle. He had served across multiple systems, from desert moons to oceanic colonies, and each time he had gone where command ordered. With no resistance, he followed orders. He fulfilled missions, he lived with scars and victories. Now he was being sent to a new military base, situated near the edge of controlled space, a zone recently declared as critical for potential new operations and classified research. This place wasn't just any outpost, it was buried in silence. Few reports came out of it, only whispers and rumors made. It passed security filters when the shuttle docked. The metallic arms of the landing bay embraced the ship like the jaws of something alive. The airlock opened slowly, releasing a hiss of recycled air. And as Rayton stepped off, he felt the sharp contrast. In temperature, the base was colder than standard installations, the lighting dimmer, the silence heavier. Each footstep echoed louder than it should have, as if the walls themselves were listening. A junior officer led him through sterile corridors. No conversation exchanged, just quiet nods and beeps from nearby scanners. The route twisted through clean but lifeless hallways until they reached a command center where a tall man in a dark gray uniform stood by a digital display reviewing files. The officer turned and saluted. "This is Captain Rayton, sir, newly transferred from the Meridian post." Commander nodded without turning. "Welcome to Base 47, Captain. Your record is solid, consistent, commendable. Now let's get straight to the point. You've been assigned to a special integration program. We are working in cooperation with off-world allies, and we're testing joint operations between human personnel and non-human operatives. You've been selected for direct pairing with one of their subjects. She will be your companion for upcoming fieldwork training and mission simulations. Your orders are to observe, cooperate, and report, no exceptions." Rayton didn't react at first. He just let the words settle inside him. He had worked alongside non-humans before, in councils, meetings, trade convoys, but never this close, never as direct partners, especially not under the term companion. The word felt strange, too personal, yet too formal to question. "She's waiting in Unit 3. Proceed now," the commander added, and dismissed him without further explanation. Unit 3 was smaller than expected, a private chamber with a surveillance panel, a resting pod, and a simple desk with 2 chairs, and standing in the center of the room was a figure unfamiliar to most but expected by Rayton. She looked humanoid in shape, with skin of a soft silver tone and long, dark strands of hair that shimmered under the blue ceiling lights. Her eyes were large and clear like still water, and when she turned toward him, there was no smile, no bow, only acknowledgement. "You are Captain Rayton," she said, her voice smooth, her accent only slightly unusual. He gave a short nod and spoke with a calm, steady voice. "And you must be the operative assigned to me." "Name?" She hesitated for half a second, then answered, "Lyra. I am here to accompany you on operations and learn human military structures, behavior, and systems. I was informed of this pairing 5 days ago. I have reviewed your previous missions." Rayton wasn't sure what to say. She was not like any other alien he had met before. She carried herself with strange grace, almost robotic, yet deeply alive. Her presence was hard to define, not threatening, not cold, just unfamiliar. He moved to the chair and sat down as she remained standing beside the panel, watching him with steady eyes. "You trained with your people, I assume. Combat field operations. What else?" "I am fluent in 7 human dialects and 14 alliance protocols," she replied. "I specialize in close-range tactics and rapid analysis. I also understand emotional signaling in humans, though not perfectly." Rayton leaned back, studying her. Every movement seemed calculated, every word measured. This didn't feel like a partner. It felt like a living machine wrapped in skin and breath. He didn't like the uncertainty, but orders were orders, and curiosity was starting to outweigh suspicion. Suddenly, The lights flickered for a moment, just one blink, and then returned to normal. Lyra looked up quickly, then turned her head toward the surveillance panel. Someone is monitoring. US, she said, not just passively, they are recording this conversation in multiple angles. Raiden followed her gaze and noticed a small shift in the panels. Corner just enough to confirm her suspicion, and just like that, the atmosphere changed. He now knew this wasn't just about training or cooperation. It was a test of something more, and they were being watched like specimens. What do they expect us to do? He asked, not looking away from the wall. They expect you to question me, she said calmly. They expect conflict, perhaps failure, maybe even aggression between us. They want to measure how long it takes for mistrust to surface or for trust to form. They want data, not success. Raiden stood up and walked toward the window, which showed only a dark steel wall on the other side. No stars, no space, just confinement and controlled structure. He knew now that this assignment would not be about missions or enemies outside the walls. It would be about what happened inside between them. He looked over his shoulder at Lyra, who had now taken the second chair, facing him, not as a subordinate, not as a threat, but as something different, something waiting. Let's get one thing straight, he said. You follow my lead out there. I don't stab partners in the back, and I don't leave anyone behind. I don't care what they're expecting from us. We do the job, we stay alive, and we figure this out together. Understood. Lyra gave the smallest nod, not of submission, but of agreement. Something passed between them. Not warmth, not friendship yet, but a quiet agreement of survival. We begin training at dawn, she said. We are scheduled for a simulation in hostile terrain zone 6. I have reviewed the terrain maps, and I suggest a dual perimeter approach. I will explain en route. Raiden nodded, then turned back toward the door. For the first time since his arrival, something inside him shifted. Not trust, not yet, but something close to interest, maybe even the beginning of something deeper. And as he stepped out of the room with Lyra silently walking beside him, he couldn't help but feel that his real mission had already started long before he ever set foot on this base. Morning came without the warmth of sunlight, as the base existed far from any star that could give natural light. Artificial systems maintained a cycle, but it felt wrong to Raiden, who woke to the sound of an automated alert calling him to the training deck. His body moved with the ease of habit, his mind already preparing for another day under watchful eyes. The memory of yesterday still fresh, the quiet, strange presence of Lyra lingering in his thoughts like an echo that refused to fade. She was already there, standing in the open floor of the deck, her form still calm, her expression unreadable, dressed now in a dark fitted suit marked with both human and alien military symbols. She looked both familiar and foreign. Raiden stepped forward without a word, joining her at the marked zone. Their eyes met for a brief second. Nothing said, but something exchanged. Instructor, an older man with a mechanical leg, barked out instructions for the simulation. This would be a duel objective task: breach, secure, and extract from a simulated enemy compound hidden within a shifting terrain. They had 30 minutes to complete the task and limited resources. Raiden listened carefully while Lyra stood motionless but alert, absorbing every word like a machine designed for focus. Once inside the simulation dome, the environment changed. Instantly, trees of synthetic fiber and uneven ground beneath their boots. Sounds of distant movement filled the air. Raiden took point. Lyra followed behind, not too close, not too far. Her steps made no sound, her eyes scanning constantly, like she saw more than what was visible. They moved through the mock forest until the first sign of movement triggered the trap. A sudden explosion threw dirt into the air. Raiden rolled to the side, pulling his weapon and taking position. But Lyra had already moved without hesitation. She leaped forward, disabling the threat with a fast strike, her body twisting with practiced precision. The enemy combatant fell like a puppet cut from strings. You moved before the trap triggered, he said while regaining position. I saw the shimmer of the device edge. She answered. Your training focuses on sound and instinct. Ours relies on light distortion and air pattern. Raiden didn't respond immediately. Instead, he adjusted his approach, listening more, watching how she read the environment. Her method was alien, yes, but effective. They breached the outer defenses of the compound and moved through corridors of rusted metal and flickering lights, the simulation trying to disorient them. But Lyra's calm never broke. She remained fluid, graceful, deadly. In quote, Lyra's calm never broke. She remained fluid, broke. The command room, they found the data core, a glowing blue disk locked inside a wall terminal. Raiden began the extraction process while Lyra held the perimeter, and as the data began uploading, the lights around them dimmed. A soft pulse rang through the air. The simulation was shifting into fail-safe mode. A sudden increase in difficulty. Figures emerged from the walls, fast, silent, covered in black suits with no symbols. They moved with trained coordination, far too advanced for training dummies. Raiden fired, suppressing them, as Lyra moved like a blade between them, her strikes surgical, no hesitation, no emotion, only efficiency. The simulation was being pushed beyond regulation. Someone had modified the program. After the core was secured, Raiden gave the signal to retreat, but on the way back, the terrain had changed paths. Blocked new threats placed with precision, designed not to test but to break them. Lyra guided him through alternate routes using knowledge not present in any mission briefing. She moved like she knew the layout beforehand, which made Raiden's suspicions rise again. Once outside the dome, the walls shimmered and the environment vanished, leaving only the training room. Once more, both stood in silence, breathing steady. The instructor returned with a frown on his face, looking at his device, then at them. You finished the task in 17 minutes with minimum damage. That's well above expected results, but the sim glitched mid-sequence. Someone changed the parameters without authorization, he said, with a voice mixed with confusion and concern. Raiden didn't reply. He just gave a silent nod and walked off with Lyra following behind her. Presence as quiet as always. Back in their unit, Raiden stood near the observation panel, watching the red light blink slowly. The signal that meant recording was still active. He turned to her eyes. Sharp voice, low. You knew the terrain. You reacted too fast. You knew about the altered conditions before we saw them. Tell me why. She sat down slowly, looking at her hands before lifting her eyes to meet his. I was given advanced exposure to base layouts, enemy tactics, and behavioral studies, including altered scenarios. It was meant to ensure my survival and protect yours. My reactions are trained and enhanced for these purposes. I did not break protocol. That wasn't training, that was a live threat. Someone was trying to see if we'd fall apart under pressure, he said, and then added, and you knew they'd push you. She suspected it, she replied, but suspicion is not evidence. I chose to respond as needed. If you failed, they would blame me. If I failed, they would cancel the program. Raiden paced for a moment, his boots heavy on the floor, his thoughts heavier. Still, this was no partnership. This was a test for both of them, pushed from the shadows by people who treated them like tools, not soldiers. He looked at her again, her posture straight, her voice calm, but something beneath that exterior seemed like a pressure building, like she knew more than she was allowed to share, and he hated secrets in the field. You're not here just for observation, are you? He asked quietly. You're here because someone wants to prove something, maybe to your people, maybe to ours, maybe both. She answered with silence at first, then nodded once, a slow, reluctant motion. I am here as the first of my kind to be paired in full military integration. If I fail, it means the others may never get a chance. My presence here is both symbol and signal. I must not fail, but I cannot lie to you either. Raiden stepped back, leaning against the wall, crossing his arms, as the red light blinked again, and again. Someone was watching. Someone always was, but the more they watched, the more determined he felt not to break, not to fall into their trap. Then, let's give them what they don't expect, he said, in a steady voice. Let's work together and win their test, but on our terms, not theirs. And when this is over, I'll make sure everyone knows how they tried to set us up. Lyra stood quietly for a moment, then gave a small nod, and for the first time a subtle change appeared in her expression. Not a smile, not quite, but something close to understanding, maybe even trust. Raiden looked out at the hallway ahead. Tomorrow would bring another mission, another test. But tonight he finally understood something important about his companion. She was not the enemy, but she had enemies on both sides just like him, and that was enough to start something stronger than orders, stronger than protocols, something human. Silence of the corridor stretched long as Raiden walked with his hands behind his back, his mind weighed down by thoughts he couldn't shake. Since the simulation with Lyra, things had changed, not just in how he viewed her, but in how he felt the base around him. Something about the way people watched them, how the officers acted, how even the air felt heavier. He sensed layers beneath every order and every smile. When he reached the operations hall, the lights overhead flickered for a moment. A glitch maybe, or maybe another reminder that nothing here was normal. The commander stood near the main console reviewing mission logs, his eyes sharp as always. He turned when Raiden entered, his voice formal and clipped as if speaking from a script. Captain Raiden, you and your companion are being deployed on an extraction mission. Effective immediately. The location is Grid 8, a recently abandoned mining facility on the edge of the Black Sand Belt. We have reason to believe that a rogue signal is being transmitted from that zone, and it may contain stolen research data from our labs. Your task is to recover the source, extract the data, and return without engagement, unless necessary. Raiden listened without interrupting, noting the way the commander avoided eye contact and gave no detail about enemy forces or expected resistance. It smelled wrong, the kind of wrong he had known in deep field missions, where command wanted results but didn't want to explain the risk. Lyra joined him moments later, silent and composed as always. She nodded once to the commander and then fell into step beside Raiden as they moved toward the loading bay. She didn't speak until they were alone in the corridor, and even then her voice was soft. This assignment was not in our scheduled rotation, she said. I checked the mission roster 2 days ago. Our name was not listed for Grid 8. Raiden nodded. I figured as much. They're pushing us again, and they don't care if we come back. They want to see how far we'll go or how much we'll break. As the transport shuttle rose from the base floor and lifted into open sky, Raiden watched the terrain shift below. Black sand dunes spreading across the ground like waves frozen in time. Abandoned mining towers stood crooked, casting long shadows in the pale light. Ahead of them lay silence. Ahead of them lay something more than a signal. When they landed, the wind hit first, sharp and dry, like knives cutting across their armor. The mining facility stood tall but broken, a skeleton of metal and stone, half buried in sand. The doors hung open like a mouth waiting to swallow them. Raiden drew his weapon, and Lyra activated her scanner. Without a word they entered together. Inside, the hallways were narrow, rusted cables hung from the ceiling. Broken lights blinked at odd intervals, and the smell of old fuel clung to the walls. Lyra moved ahead, her steps silent, her device blinking softly. She stopped near a panel and pointed. Signal is coming from the lower data chamber, 4 levels down. We must proceed with caution. There is no record of maintenance here for the last 3 years. As they descended, the air grew colder, the sounds fewer, and the shadows deeper. Something moved in the corner of Raiden's eye. Too fast, too silent. He turned sharply, weapon raised, but nothing stood there, only a faint sound like breathing, too soft to trust. When they reached the chamber, the door was locked, sealed by manual override. Lyra placed her hand on the panel and spoke softly in a language Raiden did not know, and the door opened as if responding to her voice. Inside, the room was dim, but active. Strange machines hummed around a single core, glowing faint blue in the center of the floor. Raiden moved to retrieve the data, but just as he reached the core, a sharp voice echoed from above. Freeze hands. Where? I can see them. Both turned quickly, weapons drawn, but the room was now filled with figures in dark armor, not from the base, not part of any faction. Raiden recognized these were not soldiers. They were something else, hired hands, or worse. Their leader stepped forward, his face hidden by a black mask, his weapon aimed directly at them. Thank you for activating the terminal for us, the masked man said. We had trouble getting past the voice lock, but it seems our alien friend was useful after all. Lyra stood still, her body tense, her eyes locked. On the enemy, she whispered, he is not from this world. His energy is synthetic. His armor is stolen tech. Raiden cursed under his breath, realizing the whole mission was a setup they were never meant to retrieve. Anything they were sent to activate the core, so others could steal it and possibly eliminate them in the process. Before the masked man could speak again, Raiden opened fire, hitting one of the attackers in the chest. The room burst into chaos as gunfire echoed and metal sparked. Lyra moved like wind, fast and precise, each move cutting down an enemy before they could react. Raiden covered her flanks, taking down 2 more with clean shots, but the numbers were against them. Lyra took a hit to the shoulder, but did not fall. Her body spun and twisted as she drove a blade through one of the masked soldiers. Raiden pulled her back toward the wall, covering her as they regrouped, but the core was gone, taken in the confusion, the masked leader retreating through a side exit with the prize. We need to get out now, Raiden shouted. No data, no victory, just survival. Lyra nodded, pressing a patch over her wound as they pushed through a maintenance tunnel, crawling through broken pipes and hanging cables, the heat rising around them. The tunnel finally led them to the outer ridge of the facility, where they signaled the shuttle and waited, weapons raised, eyes scanning for pursuit. Back on the shuttle, the silence between them was heavy. Lyra sat across from him, her wound treated, her face expressionless, but her eyes told a story of pain and frustration. They used us again, she said quietly, her voice low enough only he could hear. Raiden leaned back against the cold wall of the shuttle, his hand clenched into a fist. We were never meant to win that mission. They wanted to see if we'd live or die. They didn't care about the core, they cared about us. As the shuttle returned to the base, the stars outside looked the same as always, but something inside both of them had shifted. They were no longer partners by assignment. They were now companions in survival, betrayed by the same hands, expected to fall under the weight of false orders and silent games. And yet they had survived for now. The return to base felt colder than before, not because of the air, but because of the silence that followed them down the corridor. Guards stood with blank faces. Officers looked away as Raiden and Lyra passed. Even the automated systems responded slower, as if the entire base had been told to ignore their presence. The shuttle doors closed behind them, but the weight of what happened at the outpost followed like a shadow that refused to let go. Raiden walked ahead with heavy steps, each one louder than the last, his thoughts spinning fast while his face remained unreadable. He knew what they had done to them, knew the mission was false from the start, and that the core was never meant to be recovered. It had been bait, a trick, a setup designed to test not the system, but the people inside it, and now someone was making sure no trace of that test remained. Lyra followed behind with steady movement, her shoulders still sore, but her expression calm. She noticed the missing security cameras, the inactive monitors, the silence from the officers who had once greeted them with stiff words. Now they pretended she was not even there, and for the first time since her arrival, she felt not watched but erased, like her presence had been rewritten by someone behind locked doors. They entered their unit and the door closed slowly behind them. No lights came on automatically, no voices welcomed them back. Raiden stepped toward the console and opened the data feed, only to find their entire mission log missing. No records, no visual files, no voice reports, everything gone, as if the operation had never existed, and the two of them had never left the base. Erased it, he said without turning, his voice low and tight. Lyra stood beside him now, her eyes scanning the black screen. They removed us from the system, she said. They fear the truth, or they fear what we became during that mission. Raiden turned and walked to the far wall, placing his palm against the cool metal, letting the silence stretch for a long moment. Then he spoke again, voice steady. This time they're not just testing us anymore, they're hiding us. And if they're hiding us, then they're preparing to use us or discard us, whichever comes first. Enoch interrupted his thoughts, soft but sharp. 3 times spaced perfectly. He turned quickly and unlocked the door, revealing a young tech officer, barely out of academy, standing nervously with a sealed case in his hands, his eyes wide with the kind of fear that came from knowing things you weren't supposed to know. Captain, he whispered, I wasn't here, I didn't come here, you never saw me. He handed the case and disappeared down the hall. Before Raiden could ask a single question, inside the case were recovered fragments of their mission data. Encrypted, broken, scattered, but real visual feeds from the ambush, biometric scans from the masked attackers, recordings of the modified simulation logs. Lyra moved quickly, her fingers dancing over the panel, reconstructing data and restoring voice. Clips one by one, until the full picture began to form. They were targeted by internal assets, not outside enemies. The rogue unit that ambushed them was not listed on any database, but their armor tech matched classified prototypes developed by a secret branch known only in whispers, a group that worked outside normal command, tracking threats, manipulating outcomes, erasing failures. Raiden paced slowly as the truth settled like dust around his feet. They used you as bait, he said. They used me as a shield, and when we didn't break, they tried to wipe the board clean and start again. Lyra looked up, her voice quiet. If we reveal this, they will shut the program. If we stay silent, they will control everything that follows. Either way, we become weapons, not people. Raiden turned to her, his voice low but strong. Then we reveal it, but not to them. We find someone above them, someone who cannot be touched. We send this up the chain and let the truth do the damage they feared. They worked through the night, cross-referencing codes, tracing communication patterns, mapping every hidden layer of the base network until they found a signal, a silent frequency used only by the Outer Council, meant for emergencies and unsanctioned reports. Raiden prepared the file. Lyra added her own data, and together they encrypted the message and launched it through a hidden relay hidden in one of the maintenance drones used for surface patrol. When the file was sent, they waited. The next day, the entire base felt different. Alerts echoed down the halls. Units were placed on lockdown. Officers summoned into private rooms, and across the command center screens began flashing red, not from attack, but from authority. A voice cut through the silence. Firm and final. This is Council Command. Halt all local operations. Secure all personnel. Pending investigation. Reigned and Lyra stood together as soldiers in black stepped into the base. This time, not the rogue kind, but the real kind. The kind that answered only to the highest powers above. The commanders were taken for questioning. The data systems were locked for audit, and within hours, the facility was being combed from top to bottom, like a nest of secrets being torn open. The officer who once ignored them now stood silent in chains. The commander who ordered their mission now answered questions from a council judge through a secure channel, and the silence that once followed Raiden and Lyra was now replaced by whispers of respect, fear, and quiet recognition. In the evening, a representative arrived to meet them, a tall woman with a silver badge and eyes that saw more than they revealed. She spoke directly and without delay. The council received your report. It confirmed activity outside authorized protocols and actions that placed both human and non-human personnel at risk. Your decision to report was correct. Your partnership has been evaluated and confirmed as viable. Under combat pressure, your companion is hereby recognized as a fully trusted operative, and the integration program will continue under new supervision. Raiden nodded once, and Lyra did the same, but the weight between them did not vanish, not yet. Because truth always had a price, and survival always carried its own scars. After the representative left, they sat alone in their quarters. The lights low, the red blink gone from the panel above. For the first time in days, no one was watching them. And that silence felt different. You changed how they see me, Lyra said, not as an experiment, but as a soldier. Raiden looked at her, his voice quiet. You earned it, not because of who sent you, but because of how you stayed. She didn't respond at once, but when she did, her voice was softer than before. Then let us see what comes next, not for them, but for us. And in the stillness of that room, a choice was made, not by order, not by force, but by two souls, caught between lines drawn by others, and yet still walking forward together. The corridors no longer echoed with cold silence. They no longer whispered behind Raiden's back or stared at Lyra with suspicion. Everything had shifted after the council inquiry. The base had been reshaped, restructured, cleared of the unseen shadows that once controlled everything from behind sealed doors. Officers were replaced, systems were rebuilt, and the integration program was no longer a quiet experiment. It had become an official operation, sanctioned, protected. And Open Raiden stood on the outer platform of the base, watching the desert sky stretch far beyond the hills. The wind brushed against his face, but it felt cleaner. Now, like the place had breathed out the lies it once held, his uniform still carried dust from past missions, but his mind was no longer carrying the same weight. He had come here, expecting routine orders, expected another mission to complete, and another report to file, but what he found instead was something that changed his path, and forced him to look beyond protocols, beyond duty, and into something deeper. Lyra joined him without a sound, standing beside him, not behind, not ahead, just beside, and when she looked out over the sand, it was not with fear or curiosity, but with calm, steady understanding. She was no longer a test subject or a tool. She was no longer someone measured only by how well she obeyed orders. Now she stood with her own choices, her own voice, and her own purpose. They watched the sun rise slowly, its light turning the edges of the rocks into burning gold. The silence between them was not empty, it was full of what had passed, and what might still come. Orders arrived not long after a council seal marked the top of the file. It was not just another assignment, it was a request, a personal directive from the upper command, asking for the two of them to lead a small unit into a border zone, recently disturbed by unknown signals, possibly new contact, possibly danger. They were not forced, not assigned, but asked because of what they had proven, because of what they had survived. Raiden placed the file down and turned to Lyra, waiting for her answer. She met his eyes and spoke with clarity. If we go together. If you accept, I accept. But if you refuse, I will not go without you. Raiden smiled faintly and nodded. Then we go, not because they want us to, but because it is right. Preparation was fast, their gear was light, their route planned with precision. The shuttle was ready within the hour, and their small crew waited with quiet discipline. 3 humans, 2 non-humans, all trained, all willing to follow under their lead, not because of rank, but because of trust, built through action, not words. As the shuttle lifted from the platform, the base grew smaller below, but the memory of what had happened there did not fade. It simply became part of the foundation. They now stood on the mission. Ahead was unknown, the signals unclear, but this time they carried more than weapons. They carried proof that cooperation was possible, that unity could be forged not by rules alone, but by shared fire and earned respect. Through the window, Raiden saw the stars beginning to appear in the far distance, and for the first time in a long time he did not feel like a pawn in someone else's game. He felt like a soldier in control of his own path, and beside him sat someone who had become far more than a companion, far more than an assignment. During the flight, Lyra adjusted the navigation screen, her movements smooth as always, but now with something else behind them, something more human, perhaps more personal. You trust me now, she said, not as a partner, but as something more. Raiden turned toward her and nodded. It took time and mistakes and fire, but yes, I trust you, not because they said to, but because you earned it, and because I saw you choose me when no one else did. Lyra's expression did not change much, but in her eyes there was a quiet warmth, one that no scanner or command directive could create. When they landed at the edge of the border zone, the terrain was rough, broken hills and deep valleys filled with fog. The signals were coming from inside a ravine carved through ancient stone. The team moved forward slowly, scanners active, eyes sharp, the tension real but different. Now it was not fear of failure but focus on completion. Inside the ravine they found the source, a small crashed vessel, hidden beneath fallen rocks. Old markings on the hull, unreadable, damaged beyond recognition. But the core still active, faint, and pulsing with energy that did not match any known Alliance tech. Raiden approached with caution while Lyra circled the area, watching for any threat. When he touched the hull, a faint vibration moved through his glove, like a heartbeat, still alive inside metal bones. The team worked fast recovering data fragments, scanning energy patterns and preparing the site for secure transport. But the real discovery came when Lyra found a small chamber within the wreck. Inside was a single figure in stasis, not dead, not alive, suspended, a life form, not matching any registered race. Its body thin, its skin like faded glass, its pulse slow but steady. Raiden joined, her eyes fixed on the figure, and asked softly, "Do we wake?" Lyra looked at him, and then at the being, her voice calm. "This is not the end of our mission. It is the beginning of another. This is why we were sent, not by orders, not by chance, but by something deeper, maybe fate, maybe purpose." Raiden placed his hand on the glass and felt the faint thrum again, a signal, a possibility. "Then we wake it," he said, "and we learn." As the chamber opened and the stasis field faded, the being's eyes flickered slowly open, and for a moment, the entire ravine held its breath. Not from fear, but from the weight of something new beginning. Later, when the report was sent, and the council responded with instructions and questions and approval, Raiden and Lyra stood once more at the edge of a rising dawn, watching the world shift again. "You were assigned to me," Lyra said once, "as a test, as a task, but now I walk with you, not because they command it, but because I choose it, and I walk with you." Raiden replied, "Not as a soldier, not as an officer, but as your equal, because what we have is no longer a mission, it is a path." They looked out across the rising hills, their shadows stretching together, not apart, and took their first step forward into whatever came next, not by force, not by command, but by choice. Together, the end